Hogan is joining us on the panel this hour. National Review contributing editor DeRoy Murdoch is here as well. And from the Independent Women's Forum, the president, CEO of Independent Women's Voice, I should say, Heather Higgins. Welcome, all three.
Good to see you.
So, we talked a little bit last hour, but we'll talk more this hour, Heather, about the market, just from the big picture point of view, especially if you're President Trump and you're under fire from all kinds of different things, all kinds of different angles. You can go out and say, look at that market at an all-time high. Everyone's 401k is up. So pretty good stuff. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, we are having some slowdown, but that's because there's a much greater slowdown in the Eurozone and in China. That will lead for pressure for more Fed rate cuts. But even those who are, the people who don't like Trump are in a bizarre way sort of hoping for a recession. But the market tends to be the leading indicator on that, and the market is not saying that.
I think it's interesting, Chris, and you look at interest rates all the time and advising people how to, what to do with their money, is if things are so great, and there are many reasons to believe that they are at least pretty good, why the heck do we need to be cutting rates like this? Because that is the expectation, and maybe to some extent why the market keeps hitting all-time highs.
Well, I think there's always this ploy to try to manipulate the situation, to try to grow consumer confidence, which also boosts spending. But in reality, what I tell people is look at your own personal situation. Let's not get caught up in the magic numbers. This is a roller coaster ride. Yeah. Anybody that knows investing knows that. It's going to go up, it's going to go down. But if you've got a long-term plan and you understand what you're doing, you're going to be okay.
I thought the President DeRoy made, I mentioned this last hour, but I just haven't heard him do it this way, but I thought that was an interesting political argument today in Chicago when he did the show of hands and said how many people's 401ks are down, no hands, how many people's 401ks are up, all the hands go up, and that allows him, again, we know about all the outside distractions, to put it mildly, attacks, scandals, whatever it may be. But if that question is on his side, how is he set up for re-election?
It's a great question because it doesn't point to people on Wall Street, the rich people in the Hamptons, et cetera. It talks about regular people and the money they're making, the money they're saving, the money they're putting aside for their retirements, et cetera. And something like about 55-60% of the American public, I think, is invested in the stock market through their pension funds, through their unions, et cetera. Those people are doing better. Their nest eggs are growing. Yeah. And I think it highlights that and sort of takes the focus off the Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren claim that this is just the rich people getting
we've got unemployment at a 50-year low, and you've got the incentive for further rate cuts, not relative to other historic U.S. rates, because they are low relative to that. But if you look at what's going on in Europe, where you've got negative rates, it's actually a disincentive for U.S. companies to not be competitive on that front. And so there's a high expectation that because of those external pressures that we're going to see another Fed rate cut, and that's going to improve this again. And you see the impact of the economy and just how the Democrats' rhetoric has changed. They're no longer talking about jobs. They're talking about the job you want, right? Because they know, so you're starting to see the shift as they try to tack against a stronger economy.
Let's be honest. Right now, things are going well. I don't blame him for raising his hand and attaching himself to this positive with unemployment being very low, with rates going well, things are moving well. He's got to get prepared because he's going to catch the blame as soon as it starts to shift.
Well, and to that point, I mean, if we're being fair, if the market was up 100 today, it was up 80 now, but say it was down 100, which it easily could be on another day, we could have easily shifted this conversation, DeRoy, and the data is there to talk about whether the economy is slowing down, especially in key swing states. We could say, well, manufacturing is the one area where the economy is slow. So let's look at Michigan, let's look at Wisconsin, let's look at Pennsylvania, and does the president get hurt politically there? That could easily be a conversation by the end of this week.
I think
you never know.
Point to certain specific areas or sectors they're not doing as well as we'd like, but the overall picture is magnificent. I mean, Heather probably has these figures since she runs Independent Women's Voice. I believe unemployment for women is at the lowest level since the Eisenhower era. This is incredible.
Well, that'll be a big political story, right? So say you go in, I'm sorry to cut you off, we'll come back in a second, but if you go to the suburbs, because it reminded me, well, you brought up Heather's name, if you go to the suburbs of Philadelphia, say, or you go to another suburb where the Republican Party didn't do as well in the midterms of 2018, but the president needs to hang in there to be reelected in 2020, what about that push-pull between personality on the one hand, things the president has said, versus what DeRoy's talking about, unemployment at record lows for many groups, including women, right?
Yeah, no, there have been a series of things, and we're starting to see this in Chicago as well, where the president is talking about things, I don't think deliberately to get suburban women, but in a way that will make it, even though I don't like him personally, I like what he is doing, that sort of narrative.
Right.
And so, for example, you have the police chief in Chicago talking about how his job is to be a voice for the voiceless, and Trump is saying, I'm sorry, your crime rate is 6 times higher than New York.
We're going out there in a moment. Jeff Flock is there. We're going to talk about that. But
yeah,
no, I hear what
the
you're
last time they had a Republican mayor was 1931. And so this is a high point of contrast that he can use. And his attitude is like, this is not Afghanistan. I can't fix Afghanistan, but just like I can take on the homeless problem in San Francisco and LA, and the way that impacts families who've got to go in and out of these cities and their deep fears about disease, also their deep fears about crime, I'm going to be looking into trying to fix this for you.
Back up to Roy, as I said, I cut you off a moment ago, I apologize, but to pick back up on that point, the election may very well be decided, to Heather's point, by people who are looking at it and saying, well, I'll vote for him even though I don't love him, being President Trump, or the other way around. People say, well, you know what, things are fine for me, but I just can't do it. I can't have another 4 years. Those are the people that will decide it, right?
President Trump can ask an absolutely devastating question, which is the question that got Ronald Reagan to the White House, which is, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And unless something goes completely wrong with this economy, the answer will be yes. I think a lot of people overlook the Twitter blasts and a lot of the other stuff and say, you know what, I am better off, let's keep this thing going, rather than put somebody who's going to derail all of this and put us back in the poorhouse.
And let's not forget, in 2016, Hillary was carrying Chicago by 70%.
Yeah.
So this literally could be a city where it's a throwaway for him, where he's looking at this and says, listen, it's democratic, it is what it is. We're going to move forward.
No,
and
I
gain
agree
ground
on
in other
Chicago.
areas.
I think some of these suburban areas are different stories or a different debate. We're going to go to Chicago, by the way, which is a good lead-in. So we'll